So today we're joined by Nicole from the Lesbian Action Group
in Australia.
Nicole, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about what you've been up to?
So, yes, my name's Nicole. I'm based in Victoria in Australia. And I've been a member of the Lesbian Action Group since then. This is the second iteration of the Lesbian Action Group. I think there was a Lesbian Action Group that was active, I don't know, maybe in the 90s, and we've sort of revived the name, and I've been involved with it since the beginning. I'm also involved with LGBT Alliance Australia, which comes under the same umbrella as the LGBT Alliance in the UK.
Yeah.
So I'm a lesbian. I came out in 1986 when I was 19, and I came out to a thriving lesbian community in Melbourne, and I was very grateful that there was that community at the time, because coming out's really hard, you know. It's not an easy process, and I was extremely grateful that there was a really supportive lesbian community out there. And once you know where to go and who to sort of hang out with, I had older women who quite happily mentored me and showed me the way as to how to live life as a lesbian, which isn't easy.
Yeah.
And you could go out pretty much any night of the week in Melbourne and find a lesbian-only something. A pool night, a pub night, a dance, a ball. It was a thriving community. There was something on every night of the week.
Yeah. Do you think it's the same for young lesbians now in terms of coming out and finding their feet?
Not in the least. It's completely changed. And I've watched this. Next year will be 40 years since I came out. So I've watched this happen over the last 40 years. And it's really been the rise of the corporate LGBTIQ plus that has seen the lesbian community in Australia and around the world have to go underground, because we are being force-teamed with males. Every single event that happens under the LGBTIQ plus banner is compulsory mixed-sex space. There are no lesbian-only anythings anymore. There are no gay men's-only anythings anymore. Everything is compulsory mixed-sex, which has its place, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Back when I first came out, lesbians had their own space, gay men had their own space. Bisexual males and females came and went from either the lesbian or the gay community, and we all happily came together in mixed-sex space at events like, say, the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras. So, mixed-sex space certainly has its place. I'm not disputing that for a second.
Yeah.
But since that whole corporate LGBTIQ plus has risen, we've been subsumed into that without any real consent, to be honest. It's just happened. There's been no consent, and so this has been forced on us. This has been forced on the lesbian community. We now cannot have single sex events anymore. And the average person out there might think, well, that's no big deal. But when you're a lesbian, you're exclusively attracted to other females. You're not interested in males, no matter how they identify. Doesn't mean we hate them. It just means that we're not interested in them, just like we're not interested in heterosexual men or heterosexual women, So, this whole thing's been forced on us, and we have been underground for over 20 years now.
I'm surprised that it's that long. I really am.
Yeah, no, it's been a long time.
Honestly, because I'm not a lesbian, I thought that because gay and lesbian and bisexual people had been more or less accepted in society, that was not a problem, but obviously I'm totally wrong.
Yeah, no, it's a problem.
But for 20 years,
that
blows my mind.
It's a long time. Yeah. And so what happened 20 years ago, a bunch of lesbians were organising a big lesbian festival in Melbourne, and they applied for a single-sex exemption, which back then you could do. And an exemption basically is a legal document that enables you to legally discriminate. Okay? And so in our case, it's to legally discriminate against anyone who's not a lesbian, so we can have that lesbian-only space.
Uh-huh.
So I think I wasn't involved in this at that time, but I think the exemption was granted, and then a trans woman decided that they weren't happy about that because they were being excluded. And I think the exemption might have been overturned, and the lesbian women just threw up their hands and decided it was all too difficult. And we've pretty well been underground ever since then.
So you didn't go ahead with the event?
No, it didn't go ahead. So back to your question about young lesbians now coming out.
Yeah.
What are their options? Their options are to go to an LGBTIQ plus organisation and try and find lesbians there. We have heard very disturbing tales from young lesbians about their experience of these mixed sex events. You know, males who identify as lesbians are trying to pick up these young women. They're often older men or males. There are stories of sexual harassment, sexual coercion, being told that they're sexual racists because they won't accept a woman with a penis, and rape stories when these young women, you know, are trying to get out of these sexual sort of encounters with these males who identify as women. They also tell us that these LGBTIQ plus organisations are running queer women's nights, and they tell us that roughly a third of these queer women's nights are males who identify as lesbian.
So a third of the people there are men?
A third of the people, roughly. A lot of these trans women have a sexual fetish. I'm not sure if have you heard of autogynephilia?
I have, but would you like to explain in case people haven't?
Autogynephilia is usually heterosexual males who basically get off thinking that they're women and thinking that they're lesbians. So that the act of dressing up in, you know, women's clothes, going into women's spaces, going into lesbian spaces, sexually arouses them.
And that's why they want affirmation that they're women.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're hearing these stories from young lesbians about what's going on in these mixed sex spaces. And this is why we want lesbian only space. This is why it's really important to us. We are basically a bunch of lesbians who are saying, these are our boundaries. Please respect our boundaries. And of course, they're not being respected.
Yeah.
Even legally, even by our government.
It feels very abusive. Very abusive.
It is. It really is. Yeah. I'm doing this work that I'm doing because of the young lesbians, because of the young lesbian that I once was.
Yeah.
I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is to come out, and I know how important it is to find your community. The other thing I see happening with mainstream LGBTIQ plus for these young lesbians when they come out, a lot of them are being coerced and told that they're trans, that they're not actually lesbian because, you know, they're gender non-conforming. Well, let's face it, most lesbians and gay men are gender non-conforming.
Yeah.
It's really well known that gender non-conforming kids usually, but not always, grow up to be gay or lesbian or bisexual. So these young lesbians, that's the climate they're coming out in now. LGBTIQ plus is basically the marketing arm of the medical industrial complex that's pushing trans medicine.
Yeah.
And I find it horribly, horribly disturbing, to be honest. I see it as conversion therapy. It is. It's conversion therapy of really confused young kids. Mm-hmm. I've had gender dysphoria my entire life. I was a tomboy growing up. And I've grown up to be a reasonably masculine lesbian, a butch lesbian.
Yeah.
And I've also, over that 40 years of being an out lesbian, seen a whole generation of young butch lesbians take on a trans identity. They'd do anything rather than take on a lesbian identity and be a lesbian. Because there's still so much homophobia out there, even though, you know,
do you think that's why they're using the queer word instead of lesbian?
Yeah, this is the new homophobia. There's no doubt about it. So that's, I guess that's the context of how we've gotten to where we are legally.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, so what kind of brought the whole court case about?
So what brought the whole court case about was Kelly J. Key coming to Australia.
Right.
There are a number of us who were at Let Women Speak in Melbourne, and I'm not sure if you've seen any of the footage of it. Can I swear on this show?
Yeah,
it was a
go
shit
ahead.
show. It was an absolute shit show.
I was following it, but I can't remember which one was Melbourne, so yeah, remind me.
Yeah, it was, I'll never forget it, because I've been to many a, public demonstration and stuff, Reclaim the Night marches for women. I've also been active in the environmental movement. I've never seen anything like this. It was terrifying, to be honest, because we were probably outnumbered, I don't know, at least 10-1 by the trans rights activists. They were baying for our blood.
Do you think the women was intimidated from coming?
Oh, we all were. We were all terrified. Yeah, we really were. We were all terrified. The police did a great job holding them back. And then these Nazis turned up and walked down the street. Yeah. So
that was Mel.
And one of our politicians was at Let Women Speak, and she was terribly vilified for being a Nazi because, the Nazis walked past us. So, of course, we're all Nazis now. And then we had to finish early because the trans rights activists were punching the police horses to try and get to us, and it got too dangerous.
Yeah.
Anyway, out of that, a whole, we had to kind of, take stock and say, what's going on here? This is crazy that women can't actually stand up and speak for our sex-based rights.
Yeah.
Which is...
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable in this day and age. The Lesbian Action Group came out of that. We wanted to test the laws after seeing what had happened at Let Women Speak.
Okay.
And so we put in an application to get a single-sex exemption, because that would give us the right then to have a single-sex event. And we have a multi-million-dollar pride centre here in Victoria, LGBTIQ+, and there's a whole bunch of LGBTIQ+ organisations that are housed in this multi-million-dollar building, and they rent out conference rooms and event rooms, and we thought, well, we'll go and knock on the Pride Centre's door, and we thought we'd like to have a lesbian-only event for International Lesbian Day, which is held on the 8th of October every year.
That sounds perfectly reasonable.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? First off, our exemption was knocked back by the Australian Human Rights Commission.
I'm laughing because it's so ludicrous.
Yeah, the exemption. And the Pride Centre, of course, said we were discriminating against trans women and there was no way they'd rent a room for us in order to celebrate International Lesbian Day. So you've got a government-funded building that's paid for with the taxpayers' money, discriminating against lesbians who they're actually supposed to,
champion.
support.
Yeah. That's what they're supposed to be for.
That's what they're supposed to be for. So we actually knew that this would happen. It didn't surprise us because we know how the laws are.
Yeah.
And so just on the laws, we have a Sex Discrimination Act here, Federal Sex Discrimination Act, that came in 1984 in order to help women achieve equality, right?
Yeah.
In 2013, our first female Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, had the Act amended. And this is where the bulk of the issue has stemmed for us. They took out the definition of man and woman, and they added a definition of gender identity, which is basically a circular word salad all about stereotypes.
Yeah, I've tried to explain to someone what gender is and I can't.
No, you can't, no. So based on this amended Sex Discrimination Act, because we're wanting to legally discriminate against everyone who's not a lesbian, so straight men, straight women, bisexual people, gay men, transgender people, they would have let us do that on all accounts except for trans women who identify as lesbian. So we couldn't get our exemption. The Pride Centre were an absolute lost cause. And never mind, I might add, that the Pride Centre regularly has trans-only events.
Yeah. So they're allowed their spaces.
They're allowed their space. Yep. But we're not
and
allowed
I bet
ours.
nobody challenges that either.
Well, we have.
Have you? Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That came up in the court case.
Yeah, because of you not being able to have a lesbian-only event, basically.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
But you wouldn't have been bothered about doing that otherwise.
No. So once the exemption was knocked back, there was quite a bit of media coverage, and a barrister contacted us and said, I'd really like to represent you if you want to take this further.
Yeah.
And so he did. He's represented us. We've got a great legal team behind us. So we went to the next step up from it was to go to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. And that was a 2-day hearing in Melbourne. And out of that, the member, who's basically the judge, he decided that we could discriminate against everyone. Again, it was the same thing based on the legislation. We can discriminate against anyone except for trans lesbians. So that was it's a 50-page ruling.
Really?
But yeah.
What can you say about it?
What can you? He basically lists everything that went on in the hearing, and then puts his decision in, which is basically that it would be discriminating against trans lesbians because their category is a protected category in the Sex Discrimination Act, that being gender identity, that we couldn't discriminate against them based on their gender identity. Never mind that we can discriminate against heterosexual people and bisexual people, and, that's okay.
But that's all they are, the heterosexual men.
Yes. So that was, we weren't sure how that was going to go. We were hopeful because our team they were just brilliant in court, absolutely brilliant, and we have every confidence in them. But because of that Sex Discrimination Act being as it is, what it appears to be doing is creating a hierarchy so that gender identity, the rights of people who have a gender identity, whatever that is, trumps the rights of those of us who have a sex.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Everyone has a sex, though, yeah.
Everyone has a sex, but not anymore. He also said in his ruling that humans can change sex.
I don't understand that. Like, from what science book?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not the judge, it's the law that's the problem. It's not that the judge made the wrong decision.
That's right. Yeah, he's just going on the law.
Yeah.
Which you can understand. So our next step is to go to the federal court, and that's what we're planning to do. Our legal team are really keen to go to the federal court, and we've just filed our application to go to the federal court. I don't know that we'll be any more successful, but it's worth giving a red hot shot. And then from the federal court is the High Court. And if we get to the High Court, I think that's where they have to start looking at the legislation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my understanding as well, because obviously I've interviewed Sal Grover, and it sounds very similar.
Right. It's very similar. Yeah. We're sort of on a, parallel path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that sounds like there's some crossover there, that you're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Like parallel.
And that's a good thing because it shows up that the legislation isn't working for women.
Yeah, it does. And there's a lot more. It's not just one woman going, this isn't right.
Yeah, that's right.
I think as well, the crowdfunder that she's got, she must I don't know how many people have donated to that, but she must have a lot around the world.
Got a lot.
And how is that? How are you funding your case?
We're crowdfunding.
As well, right? Okay.
Yeah, so, people are being extremely generous, I have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we just put the crowdfunder up 36 hours ago or something. Is
that all? Just 36 hours ago? Right, okay.
Yeah.
So that's new?
That's new, yeah.
Excellent. Well, if you send me the link, I'll put it in the show notes so that we can
that'd be great.
Get that shared
that'd
for
be
you.
Fabulous.
Because I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest in helping you.
Yeah. We're just waiting on a PayPal button for people who are international.
Right.
That's been our hold up. PayPal's been slow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the whole story in a nutshell. Coming from being that young lesbian myself, to that really supportive lesbian community that I came out to what has basically been destroyed, to be honest. You know, I would hate to be a young lesbian coming out now. I really would, because my options would be to take on a trans identity, because I gather that's really pushed.
Yeah.
And not being able to find other lesbians.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that lesbians aren't really going to these mixed sex spaces as much, but like,
look, I don't know, because I don't go myself.
Yeah.
And the lesbian community in all of this has been split too. That's the other issue. You know, there's the lesbians who
want to be kind.
What's your problem? Yeah, let's be kind. That's it exactly. Yeah. What's your problem? Can't you just be kind and let them be included? But they're males, you know, and women have a right to state their boundaries, although we don't at the moment. And where women don't consent and can't state their boundaries, that's rape culture as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
That's what's being imposed upon us.
It's really ironic, isn't it, that you hear politicians talking about violence against women and girls.
Exactly.
But they can't say what the problems are. So they're saying that the numbers are increasing, but they won't name what the problem is.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell, and they might, because I haven't looked into it loads, but I think there's possibly two things that's going on for women. One's immigration. You can't talk about that. It's like you get called a Nazi and a bigot and all that as well. And the other is trans.
Yep. That's
and
it.
Of course, the other thing that's going on around that is that when it does go to court, the sentences are just ridiculously low.
That's right.
It's not taken seriously. And yet they're talking about it all like, oh, yes, we support women and girls. Violence against women and girls, let's put an end to it. But if you won't name the issues.
And if you make the legislation so that it makes it easier for, you know, these sexual predators to get to women.
Yeah.
It's just laughable, really. And also to vilify women who are stating their boundaries, you know. Yeah. We can't state our boundaries anymore, particularly lesbian women who want single-sex space. Yeah. And, you know, it has divided the lesbian community, because there were lesbian expert witnesses in our court case that came for the Human Rights Commission that, you know, were giving evidence against us. Lesbians giving evidence against other lesbians. Yeah, truly.
What evidence did they have?
One was a law academic lesbian, you know, basically saying that trans women are can be lesbians, and the, you know, the usual kind of sort of stuff. Another one of their expert witnesses she was an academic in prostitution and was also a working prostitute.
What's that got to do with anything?
I know.
What?
And she'd come up with her own sort of the different sorts of lesbians in society, and that those of us who want single-sex space are a tiny minority within a minority. And somehow that was an expert testimony.
How do they know that?
Well, it's what she'd made up. Because she's an academic, I guess she's, you know, I don't know.
The culture is that lesbians are called names and vilified when they say what they want to happen. So, like, there will be women like you who are, you know, older and they've been through stuff before, and they're not willing to shut up. But there'll be lots of maybe younger women, but others as well, who just won't say what they want. I don't really think about it and haven't considered the consequences.
Yeah.
And when you consider the consequences, the ones that you explained earlier, then it really is eye-opening.
It is, yeah.
Do you know, if you wanted to write a fiction book and you could put this stuff in, they'd say, no, you can't do it. It's too far-fetched.
It's too far-fetched, yeah. Well, yeah, no, it's actually really happening. And, yeah, I just find it really sad that there's lesbians out there willing to testify against other lesbians in a court of law, you know, because they truly believe that trans lesbians are not male. I don't know what they believe, to be honest. But I do know that they really don't want us to have single-sex space for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think that is complex, like the reasons why women do that.
Yeah. And again, it's about consent. We haven't consented to having these male lesbians in our space. There's been no negotiation. It's been forced upon us. And again, that's rape culture as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And nobody else can consent for you.
No, that's right.
You can't consent for everybody. That's not how it works.
That's not how it works. And that's what they're forcing on us.
Mm-hmm.
They really are.
And if they want to have mixed spaces, then nobody wants to stop them.
Your life. No one's going to stop them. That's right. You know, knock yourselves out. Have a great time. Mm-hmm. Please just respect our boundaries and that we would like to have single-sex space. Not all the time, but, you know, we'd be happy to come to mixed-sex events as we see fit.
Yeah.
But there's a whole cohort of gay and lesbian people now that have nothing to do with LGBTIQ because of what it stands for.
Yeah.
Because of, you know, that it's putting these young gender-confused kids on a medicalised path. Mm-hmm. Because it's vilifying gay and lesbian people who want single-sex events. It's just truly awful. I never imagined that 40 years from when I came out, this is what would have become of what was the grassroots gay and lesbian liberation movement. That's the movement I came out to.
Yeah.
It's been taken over by this corporate behemoth that's just truly awful.
Yeah. Do you think there's any, like, if what was seen in England, in the UK and possibly America as well, is that corporates are starting to drop that?
I don't think they are here.
Yeah.
Not here. We're about at least 5 years behind the rest of the world, unfortunately.
Yeah, I suspected that. Yeah. It's starting to recede even before Trump. And now Trump's came in, that's speeding it up over there. But I suspect it's ramping it up here.
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening here.
England's leading the world on this pretty much, from what I can see.
But I think it's probably America's taken over now.
Taken over, yeah, right. Yeah. So we have a very extreme left government in at the moment, and I come from the left, but I am completely politically homeless at the moment because the left have gone barking mad.
Yeah, they have.
They really have. Yeah.
It's the same here. Our government is very left-wing as well.
Yeah.
High tax, and they want to tell everyone what to do, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So, I'm not sure how this is all going to play out, to be honest. But there's a large section of what was the LGBT community that are having nothing more to do with the LGBTIQ plus, because it's homophobic, it's misogynist.
I've had some of these conversations. Obviously, when I stood for election, I had quite a lot of people asking me stuff because they hadn't really considered that there was another side to the argument. They just didn't, I don't think they knew, and so they were all for it. And then there was one moment where I told a group of women that the trans ideology was extremely homophobic, and I just got silence because they hadn't really considered it before.
Wow.
And they didn't really understand the argument. So I got a lot of questions, and then I've had been accused of being homophobic because I'll say things like, the LGB separate from the TQ, and I've been accused of what's wrong with gay men. I'm like, I've got absolutely nothing against gay men, but it's not the same as trans. It's not the same as that.
It's really not.
This ideology is harming women. It's harming men as well.
Yeah,
and
it is.
It's really harming children and young people.
Yeah. The vast majority who would grow up to be LGB if they were not medicalised.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, it's an awful movement now. It really is. Yeah. And, there's a whole a whole other movement of us who are moving away from it.
Yeah.
And we're trying to recreate our community just for LGBT people who have a sex,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Who don't have a gender identity.
No, but then you get like the people who are caught up in this, they won't accept that you don't have a gender identity and that you don't want to be called all these words like, what was it? A birthing person?
Birthing parent and a chest feeder and a
cervix haver.
Yes, yep, all of that.
So they'll insist on the language that we use, but we're not allowed to use that for ourselves.
That's right.
So they're trying to get us to use words for them.
Yeah.
That's kind, but when we say, well, I don't like that word, I want this word. Oh, no, 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 no.
No. And lesbians have penises now, didn't you know, Kelly?
It's a lady dick, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. A lady dick, that's it.
It is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
can you
really
imagine going back in time and telling someone from, I don't know,
the future?
Or in the past that this was happening? They wouldn't believe you, would they?
Yeah. And then people in the future will look back on this time and go, they were mad.
Yeah, I know. Well, I can't, I'm living through it now, and I just, when I first found out, I was like, what? This is like, because one of the speakers at the first Let Women Speak that I went to was a lesbian, and she talked about the cotton ceiling.
Yeah, right.
Which is what you've mentioned, but not with that label.
Term, yeah.
Yeah, so that is when a man tries to break the cotton ceiling, i.e. have sex with a lesbian.
A lesbian, yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, I started to look into it, and the more I found, the worse it got. And I kept saying, surely it can't get any worse than this. And then the WPATH files came out, and I was like, oh my God. So this was all about castrated men, wasn't it? And they had a fetish around a castration fetish.
Mm.
It's so dark.
It is really dark, Kelly. It really is. There's no doubt about it.
And it's really difficult to talk about in polite, company because you can't. When I was in the election, I went to a hustings. I'd never been to a hustings before, even as an audience participant. But I went to this hustings and I took part. And I had to stand up in the church where I used to go to brownies and say, no woman has a penis and no man has a vagina. And there was all these rows and rows of older people just looking at me. And you can't really work out what they're thinking. When they're listening, when people are listening to you in the audience.
Yeah.
So that was the most bizarre experience ever.
Yeah, ever. Yeah. And it's almost just when I thought I couldn't, see or read anything that shocked me, something else will come along. And some of the things I've read and seen, it's like, God, this is just the end of innocence, It's really dark what some of these blokes are getting up to. Really, really dark. You just can't. I won't say some of the worst things I've read and heard because I don't really want to shock your audience. But
I know.
Yeah.
I think I'm probably thinking of the same things as you are. Yeah. Yeah, it is quite horrific. But then even the stuff that's quite public and, the kind of bondage scene in the Pride events and the animal masks, and then there's the furries, and there's some really great accounts on Twitter like Mary Kate Delvey who uses their words and then she gets attacked. Have you heard of Mary Kate Delvey?
I think so.
Listen to trans people, and then she reads out what she's found on Reddit.
Okay.
So if you are wondering what we're thinking, if the audience want to check that out, then find Mary Kate Delvey on X, and she has lots of videos where she just reads out what these men say.
What these men are doing. And they make it perfectly public.
Yeah, they do.
They're completely open about what they're up to.
Definitely.
And the plus particularly concerns me because that's not identified. You know, that opens the door to the pedophiles, the necrophiles, the
My
really dark
understanding
stuff.
is it's MAP, so minor attracted people,
Yes.
so that is paedophiles, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it isn't. It's not specified and
No. So, yeah, there are a lot of us who are fleeing as fast as we can, the LGBTIQ plus, because it no longer represents the LGB.
No.
It used us as the cover
to
get their foot in the door. Yeah. It's like the cuckoo in the nest, really. Yeah. And they're now throwing out they're not throwing us, we're leaving of our own volition.
Yeah, so how is that community? So you said that it's underground. Have you got a sort of thriving underground community
we
of
do.
women?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're setting up. So out of the Lesbian Action Group has come the Lesbian Club.
Right.
Because we can have a private club. Legally, we can have a private club and we can include or exclude whoever we want. So we've set up a lesbian club, and out of that, we're setting up sort of chapters around Australia. And we're having a lot of online events, and we've started a young lesbian group for, young and emerging lesbians, whatever age or stage of life they're at, because we know lesbians come out later in life as well as, when they're younger.
Yeah.
And that's been terrific. So we've got some older lesbians that facilitate that, who, again, can do what was done for me when I was first coming out. We can mentor those young and emerging lesbians. And then we're organising events again. But again, you need to know about the Lesbian Club in order to find us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to send me any links.
Yeah, I'll send you the links.
Then,
that'd be great.
I'll put them in the notes because obviously the more people who know, the better.
The better, yeah.
Well, the more young lesbians who know, the better.
Yeah. And that's been terrific because they've been able to find each other. And they're the ones who are telling us what's going on in the LGBTIQ plus.
Yeah,
a lot of us,
you wouldn't know if you don't go.
Sorry?
You wouldn't know if you're not going yourself.
That's right, and because a lot of us fled the LGBTIQ plus 20 years ago when all this stuff started to happen.
Yeah.
So we're hearing terrible stories from these younger women.
This is the ironic thing, isn't it? They're supposed to be inclusive, but they're actually excluding loads of women.
They are. That's right. Yeah, they include everyone who believes their doctrine of humans changing sex. Not all of us believe that humans can change sex. In fact, a lot of us know that humans can't change sex. We can change our gender.
Nobody's shown me any evidence that you can change sex.
Not a one. Not a skerrick.
No.
Not a skerrick. And I think of my cat. If I took my cat to the vet and I said, can you change my cat from a female cat to a male cat? They would laugh me out the door.
Of course they would.
Yeah, because it's not possible.
Yeah, I think it was in England. We've had this case where a gynecologist's been suspended for refusing to treat a man. I know, I'm laughing. It's not really funny, but
did he want a prostate exam?
Well, he wanted a cervical smear, I think.
For goodness sake. Wow.
I actually got talking to someone in a business network who said that his partner was a gynecologist and she was quite worried that might happen to her.
Wow.
So
you just can't make this stuff up, can you?
It's not just the people that it's happening to, it's spreading fear.
Yeah.
You
and
can't
it's shutting down discussion.
You can't tell the truth.
Yeah, that's right.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
And I have absolutely no problem with a male dressing however he wants and, putting on the lippy gay men have done it for decades, centuries. I have no problem with that. And it wasn't a problem until they started telling us that we had to believe they were actually of the opposite sex.
When they call you names for who you want to exclude from your dating pool, that is really rapey, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
I couldn't believe it, because the first Let Women Speak that I went to, I didn't really know who the protesters were. Like, I'd not come across, obviously I didn't know anything about the movement or anything. I didn't even know that it was going to be protested, don't think. But they had banners up saying about racists, and I was like, what on earth is that about? Like, they don't even seem to know what they're protesting about.
They're just there to protest.
Yeah, but I think it must come from this like calling women racist for not wanting to sleep with men. It still doesn't make sense to me, though.
No.
Maybe I'm a bit of information missing about that. But it doesn't make sense why you would be called racist, because that's got nothing to do with race.
No, none at all. It shows more of the kind of lunacy that's coming out of this movement.
Yeah. So Nicole, I wish you lots of luck for your forthcoming more legal situations. But thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about the situation.
Nice to have a chat, Kelly.
And it's really great to see that you're pushing back and you're taking action. You're not just waiting to be taken to court. Well, not that anybody's waiting to be taken to court, but you're actually proactively doing it. I think that's really, really great and really brave.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it needs to be done.
It does. So good luck. And thank you for coming on.
That's all right.